We all love multiplayer games, and when we log in, sometimes, well, the server isn't so good. Lagging all over the place. You're here, you're there, everyone's everywhere. It looks like some kind of weird performance art piece from another dimension or something. So how can you get around that? What can you do? What can developers do? And why is everybody always asking about dedicated servers? Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today, GameRanks asks the question, what is a dedicated server, and why is it important? The way most online games work, there's a host, and then there are clients. You as a player are typically a client. I've seen cases made of more torrent-like ideas, but let's not get into that. Generally, if you're playing a commercial game, it works exactly like that. Host, client. Host is the server. And if it's a game where one of the players acts as the host, typically the game will attempt to find the player with the least latency. But there are also a lot of games where you start a game, and the player that starts the game remains the host. If that player doesn't have a very good computer, or doesn't have a very good internet connection, well, the game tends to suck. And the reason for that is not only is the player playing the game using that machine, and like all the other players, their computer is sending out all of the information as to their own location in the game, what they're doing, what their loadout is, what physics is happening near them right now, etc. And their computer is running a copy of the game and rendering all of the things that are in the game, just like any other player. But on top of that, it's also running a server where every single player's location, what they're doing, what they have, and what's going on around them is being sent to every player at all times. You might think, well, that's just numerical data. It doesn't really matter. You're just telling all the other computers to do something that takes place in the engine, and their computers are the ones that are actually handling it. And kinda yes, kinda no. Unless it's some kind of cloud server like what Microsoft is using for their new games, it's true that the host computer is not doing a lot of physics calculations or engine work for the game. But that doesn't mean it's not doing things that are a lot more taxing than just sending out numbers. It's also keeping the game in sync for every single person. And if somebody has a diverting speed, it has to figure out exactly how to keep that player where they're supposed to be for all the other players. And also it can be doing it for many different players at once. The more players you have, the more it takes, because it is doing calculations. Not necessarily physics calculations, but it has to keep track of every single thing a player's doing. When I say player location, that means where they are, X and Y on the map. Also Z, how high are they on the map? What direction are they facing? With a first-person shooter controlled by a mouse, that could mean a lot of different values being input in a very short period of time. Because a mouse being held by a human never gives you a completely straight line. It's going to be a somewhat squiggly line with a lot of different points on it, and every one of those points is a piece of data. I know you're thinking, Falcon, why are you going into all of this information? What exactly is this relevant to a dedicated server? What you're describing is just how multiplayer works. Well, yes, and I understand that a lot of people probably already know how a lot of these things work. And I understand that they probably know more than what I've said here. But this video is for people that don't entirely understand it or are just seeking a more plain language or less abstract way of being able to express it. So thus far we've talked about a little bit how multiplayer works and a little bit about what a host is. And we also now know that hosts can oftentimes be a player who's playing the game, running a set of server software and a set of client software. You probably have some idea as to what a dedicated server is just from me saying that. But to move to the next step, a dedicated server is a machine running in a building somewhere for a specific purpose. For clients playing games to connect to, and it handles all of the host activities. Keeping track, keeping score, keeping sync, it's all the responsibility of a dedicated server. And generally, all it really is a server, like a web server. Generally a fairly powerful CPU, a lot of RAM, in a rack in a server farm somewhere being cooled constantly, and kept in a specific place for a specific purpose. Having the host only dealing with that online game, only doing these things, never doing anything else, and also being connected to what is most likely a very high-speed connection means it's not also running a game engine at the same time. In theory, it could even be running a custom operating system that can only handle the functions that were necessary to keep track of what's going on in the multiplayer game. And that's all it really does, is keep track. It doesn't render anything. It doesn't need a GPU. It just needs to tell all of the players' GPUs that something's going on in a certain place. Everybody's computer renders it out on their computers or game console, because it works the same way for game consoles. It's not like we're excluding that. A server is literally there to provide a place for all of the events that are going on in the game to be wrapped up into a single package that is constantly sent out to all the other players. Why is that important? Well, obviously, for one, the game has to be the same thing for all the players, otherwise it's not a very good multiplayer game. And wouldn't it be a lot easier to achieve some type of a sync between all of the players if the host of the game wasn't a player that was also playing the game? The host really shouldn't have responsibilities spread out between syncing the game for all of the players and somebody playing the game. And let's not forget that the host computer in that scenario is also running whatever software in the background that the player has installed, either on purpose or not. So if there's something that's slowing down their computer, well, it's slowing down the match for everyone. It really doesn't work as good. And there's no situation where you can say it definitely reliably works on the same level as having a dedicated game server. It's just not possible. Hopefully you have some kind of understanding why a dedicated game server is a good thing and why it's important. I mean, relatively, as far as like world events, it's not terribly important. But if we're talking about gaming, especially online gaming, that's fast-paced and requires a lot of things to be in sync at once, there's really no better way to do it than a dedicated server. Now, I'm sure in the comments we can probably have a deeper discussion that gets into maybe more technical terminology, but at the same time, if you enjoyed a plain language explanation on something that maybe people don't necessarily all understand, do us a big favor and click the like button. If you're not subscribed to GameRanks, now is a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every single day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you next time right here on GameRanks.